Hey, what's up? Welcome back to the 2019 SNS College Football Podcast. This is the SEC preview. Your host for this episode, it's going to be Addison, as usual, myself, and then David from New Orleans, who is our SEC insider, specifically our LSU insider. I think we would call him that. What do you think? LSU insider, or would you be comfortable saying SEC insider?
I think I'm the overall SEC insider, but okay. Like some really unique angles on LSU overall with the LSU focus. Like kind of how like Paul Feinbaum's like the SEC insider, but he knows everything about Alabama or something like that, or whatever team he chooses to attach to. You can think of me like that for LSU.
I'd rather talk to you than Paul Feinbaum. So, let's start with, as we have with a couple of the other pods, and I think by the time you guys see this, the Big 12 pod will be loaded. I haven't uploaded that yet. But, Addison, if you want to start with the 2018 recap, what went down? Anything surprising? Was there just... I was like, not really.
I mean, in the regular season, not a whole lot surprising. I mean, Bama cruised through it. Really weren't challenged until the SEC championship. And then for the second year in a row, Georgia looked like they had him on the ropes, and then kind of just let it slip away.
Blew it.
Big punt.
Yeah, big old punt. I think, Bama was very, very. They essentially cruised through every game. They looked almost unbeatable. Then Georgia probably should have beat them. Credit to Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, he came in and saved the day.
And ended up beating Georgia, but. Yeah, then obviously we know what happened to Bama when they ended up playing Clemson. But, we'll start our 2019 preview. We're going to start with the East now. So let's start with Georgia, and we'll work our way down. Georgia, obviously, last year, I think a lot of people put a lot of stock into that Sugar Bowl loss against Texas. And I kind of think it's one of those things where I think they just didn't want to be there. And I'm not saying it's not an excuse for them, like, losing. Texas showed up to play. Georgia didn't. But this team, they certainly have an outlook that I think a lot of people think they could possibly go undefeated going into the SEC title game. Dave, I'll start with you. Your thoughts on Georgia this year? Just, I guess, overall thoughts. How do you think they, obviously they're the favorite. Just give me your general thoughts on them going into this year.
Georgia's definitely the favorite in the division. They are returning one of the top quarterbacks in the SEC, Jake Fromm. They have a very strong running game led by Swift. They lost some guys at skill positions, specifically a receiver, and they might have lost some guys on defense as well. So I think they're heading into 2019 with a very strong outlook on offense. They've done very well recruiting. Got some question marks around the defense, though. I think they've got some guys that they need to replace. I think their defensive line might not even be in the top half of the SEC. There's just not a lot of big-name guys, so they're going to need some recruits to step up to replace some production on the defensive line. But overall, I think you have to consider them the favorite just based on what they have returning at quarterback and their recruiting progress over the last couple of years.
Yeah, I think they had trouble protecting Fromm last year, and it seems like their O-line is actually going to be a strength this year just based on depth on the O-line this year. But I do actually agree with you that I think there's going to be some question marks on defense. It seems like they – with Kirby Smart, I think it's one of those things where, like, do you just kind of blindly trust him? And I think a lot of people are, and I think that's reasonable. Addison and I were actually just talking about this, that Georgia, they haven't really been getting to the quarterback the last few years. Especially since, like, Kirby took over, they haven't really been getting to the quarterback, and the defense has been solid, but they haven't been creating, I think, enough havoc, possibly creating enough turnovers, and I would like to see more out of them on that side of the ball as far as that's concerned. But certainly, this is a team that I wouldn't be surprised if they went 12-0. I also really wouldn't be surprised if they went like 10-2. I think there's potential for them to lose a couple games in the schedule. But Addison, do you have any additional thoughts? Like, what do you think about Georgia?
For sure, favored in every game. I agree with Tolman that the D might be a little down. I think it's still going to be really good though.
Yeah.
There aren't a lot of big names on D going into the year, but the recruiting is there. I mean, really, since Kirby Smart's been there, no one has really been better than them at recruiting. I mean, them, Bama, and Ohio State, I think, are in their own tier at the top as far as recruiting.
Last like 3-4 years, yeah.
Yeah. So there's a ton of talent. I'm sure some guys will step up. I really like Fromm. I think they don't really have any like glaring weaknesses, across the board. Like when you look at every position, I think they're pretty solid at every position. So, yeah. Once again, Georgia, they're one of the teams that you expect to be up there, in the playoff conversation all year.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. We'll
talk. I think I'm going to get into this a little bit later when we talk about the West, but Georgia's non-rivalry crossover game is going to be home against Texas A&M this year.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to note that. Well, I'm going to get into that one later.
Yeah, sure, for sure. All right, so yeah, we'll move on to the next team in the East. And again, if you guys haven't watched the pod before, we're kind of using Phil Steele's magazine as kind of like a blueprint. Like we're following the order of which he thinks they're going to finish in each of these divisions. It doesn't mean that's what we think. We're going to get into that at the end. But we will move on to the next team, the Florida Gators, who I think this is kind of an interesting team this year. I think there are a lot of national media conglomerates that really think pretty highly of Florida. I've heard, I think there's some other people that don't think as highly of them. Dan Mullen in his second year, he had a good first year recovering from that 4-7 season. That was who was the coach before that? The guy that was
McElwain.
Yeah, the guy. Yeah, so he was trash. But
he lied about like he made up that people were threatening his life or something like that, and then just kind of disappears. Like, I guess I'll resign.
Yeah, he is the. I think he's like an offensive coordinator in the MAC now. Like his fall from grace is pretty steep.
He went from Saban's offensive coordinator to Colorado State to Florida to MAC offensive coordinator.
I'm pretty certain
there was also,
he's in the MAC. Yeah.
Wasn't there that picture of like the guy like?
Well, it was either him.
It was Photoshopped, I think,
yeah,
right?
It was either him or it was the Jimmy John's like CEO.
Yeah.
So either way, it's weird. But
yeah, with the shark.
Yes. Yeah. We I think everybody knows what you're talking about. But yeah, so Florida this year, I've seen them anywhere from like I think they're around 10th in most polls that I've seen.
Yeah, I've seen top 10 mostly, hovering around like the end of the top 10.
So why don't we'll start with you this time, Addison. Your just general thoughts on Florida. Are they a legitimate contender in this division? Are they possibly, if they are, then I'll kind of, I guess, like say, are they possibly a national player at the end of the year if things work out for them? What do you think about them?
Definitely a contender in the division. It's a program that everyone always wants to be back, kind of. So they're going into this year. There's a lot of hype given how they finished the season.
Yeah,
dominating Michigan in the bowl game. We talked about it with Texas. When you look good in your bowl game at the end of the year, and sometimes you go into the year maybe with some inflated expectations. I think Florida. I think they're going to be a really good team. I think they might be a little overhyped.
Tough schedule too.
The schedule is tough. They play Miami and Florida State out of conference, so that's a pretty solid out of conference slate.
Yeah.
Skill position, I like the skill position players they have. I don't like their O-line, and I'm not sold on quarterback Felipe Franks.
Yeah.
They only bring back one O-lineman. They're going to play a bunch of good D-lines in the SEC, and Franks, when you look at his numbers, like his touchdowns to interceptions, like he's got good numbers there. He's got 24 touchdowns to 6 picks, but he's not a guy that they've really asked to like shoulder the load that much. Like he averages under 200 yards passing per game. He completes under 60% of his passes.
Right.
So it's not like they ask him to do a lot, and I'm not sold on him being a guy who can like take them to the next level.
Yeah, I think Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think their defense is going to be anything like. I think it's going to be good. I don't think it's going to be elite, and I think that's going to be a problem because I personally think this team's actually quite a bit overrated this year. I think the O line is going to struggle mightily in that conference specifically, and I am right there with Addison. I think Felipe Franks is okay, but I think he could be. It could be disastrous if that line does not give him any kind of protection, which I could see that possibly happening. So, I think Florida's good. I think if the O line could come together, this could be a contender. But I really think Georgia's actually quite a bit better than this team.
Yeah.
Dave, your thoughts on them? Do you side more with? I think Addison feels like they're a pretty legit contender, but what do you think about Florida?
So I'm gonna side a little bit more with Addison. I think that they are a legitimate contender in the East, but not on the national level. I think that they're an overall pretty well balanced team, but like you guys have already been saying, the one thing that I'm not sold on is Felipe Franks at quarterback. I just don't think he's a very efficient quarterback, and that's what you're gonna need to be a real contender in like the overall in the SEC and on the national scale. So
Yeah.
I do like them in the top half, top three of the SEC East, but not overall as a SEC title contender or national contender.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. I could definitely see it playing out like that. But we'll move on to the next team in Phil's magazine. It's gonna be the Missouri Tigers, and I find it funny that Phil has them third in this division, and he says this is a schedule pick. Like meaning I don't think this team is that good, but their schedule is maybe as easy as it possibly gets being an SEC team. Their out of conference is really weak. At Wyoming, home against West Virginia, home against Southeast Missouri. They've got Troy like a few weeks after that. They don't really have, I think, a lot of games where, like they have. I don't know. They have a bunch of games that they could definitely be the favorite. Now, I guess I'll start this time since I'm just going.
Yeah.
I think Missouri's going to be trash on defense. Like I'm just going to say it right now, flat out. They're going to suck ass on defense. And I don't know who Barry Odom is. He's been there for 4 years, and like I don't know.
He's a Gary Pinkel disciple.
Who's that again? See, I don't know who any of these
He
people
was
are.
their. He was the
Oh
coach
yeah,
before.
yeah, that's right. Yeah. So.
Come on, don't you follow Mac football? He jumped from Toledo to.
Oh yeah. Pinkel was all right.
I think he was Brad. I think he coached Brad Smith and Blaine Gabbert, Chase Daniel.
He did, yeah. Chase Daniel, NFL legend backup. Like he is the legend at backup. But yeah, so Missouri does bring in Clemson transfer Kelly Bryant this year, who Phil Steele claims is a winner. So that means he's not that good. But he could be pretty good in this offense. I think their offense actually is going to be pretty good. But I really have major concerns about their defense, and I don't think this team's going to finish third in this division. Dave, how do you feel about Missouri? Do you care? Like, go ahead with whatever you got.
The only thing that interests me about Missouri is the Kelly Bryant transfer, just because of like the name recognition. But I never thought that when he was at Clemson that he was all that great. I mean, they had with the 2 years ago when he started that playoff game against Alabama when they were the number 1 overall seed and Bama was number 4 and they scored 6 points or something like that.
Yeah.
And just totally inefficient, couldn't move the ball. So I don't see how you transfer to you transfer to Missouri and you don't have near the talent around you that you might have had at Clemson. I don't see how that's going to make them a contender at all. So there is a team that I have in mind in SEC East that I would even pick to finish above them.
Okay.
So yeah.
Addison?
Well, after Florida, yeah, you are starting to fall off quite a bit here. Missouri, interestingly, last few years, they've really dominated lower competition, and then they've struggled with the teams that, are better than them. Mm-hmm. So they're just kind of stuck in that middle there, good, not great.
Yeah.
What's funny is the schedule actually sets up for them pretty well.
It's nice.
Like as mentioned, it's really not that tough. I could see them getting to November undefeated, and it wouldn't shock me.
Yeah,
I'm not saying that's gonna happen,
it could.
but
Yeah.
just they got the easiest possible draw out of the West, playing Mississippi and Arkansas. So and they get a lot of the tougher teams at home.
Yeah.
So they could end up, having a really nice record at the end of the year and having it be, overinflated, being kind of overrated, towards the end of the season. I don't think they're not good enough to compete in this division. Definitely not, in my opinion. So, but yeah, they do have a nice schedule that could, get them a pretty nice looking record at the end of the season.
Sure. All right. Yeah, we'll move on to the next team. And like, these guys alluded to, I think a lot of these teams right after Florida are kind of in the middle here, and any one of them probably could finish 3-5 in this division. But next team is going to be South Carolina. And speaking of going from an insane, not going from like an easier schedule to what looks like possibly the hardest schedule in the country.
Yeah.
South Carolina plays Alabama. They play at Georgia. They play Florida, at Tennessee, at Texas A&M, and they got Clemson at the end of the year. So they got Bama, Georgia, and Clemson somehow.
Crossover games.
Yeah, I mean, this is like an insane schedule.
Probably, well, the coaches poll just came out, and they have the top 3 teams in the country on the schedule.
Yeah. So, I mean, Dave, I'll start with you. Just go ahead with your thoughts on South Carolina. Are they gonna be able to survive this schedule at all? Like, are they a surprise contender, or are they definitely not even going to come close to that?
The thing is that I like their team. They bring back Jake Bentley. I think it's a pretty solid quarterback. Definitely, in the upper half of quarterbacks in the SEC. I think they bring back a talented secondary, some skill players around him. Will Muschamp is going to have a pretty solid defense. So I really like the team, but the schedule is the issue. So had it not been for the schedule, I would definitely pick them as a contender, but perhaps look for them to give a couple of those teams, a couple of those top tier teams that they do have to play a tough game.
Yeah, I could definitely see them being kind of frisky in some games. Addison, I'll let you go next. Do you have anything to add to what Dave said?
Definitely the toughest schedule, in my opinion. They could be better than Missouri, and it just could be a case of that their schedule's too tough that they end up finishing behind them. I agree.
I do think they're better than Missouri, but
I do too.
Of schedule.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think they're a solid team. I just don't see them, being a because they're gonna take some lumps early and then be like a non-factor, in the division race the rest of the way. So
yeah. 2 years from now, is Will Muschamp still the coach?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd say yes. I mean,
I do too.
He doesn't
I think he's
like.
He hasn't like. I mean,
It's been all right. I mean, it hasn't been good, but
it's been like he hasn't done any. He hasn't been like very controversial.
Yeah, and unless they completely collapse this year,
good enough given the landscape of the SEC. I think it would take.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, unless they completely collapse this year, he'll probably get a pass on this year anyway.
Okay. Yeah, we'll move on to the next team. One of our favorite programs to just absolutely annihilate verbally is the Tennessee Volunteers. For a while, this program was a real dumpster fire. They also have a pretty tough schedule. They've got, it looks like, a few tough road SEC games. They get BYU out of conference. I don't think we can confidently say we know a whole lot about Jeremy Pruitt yet. Yes, he's in the Saban coaching tree, but to be fair, he was Tennessee's ninth choice for head coach. And last year they weren't very good. They definitely were not competitive in quite a few games, but they did give a couple, I guess, okay teams some pretty good games. I like their quarterback. Yeah, I think that he's actually pretty good, and I think there's actually some talent on this roster. If I actually feel it's kind of interesting, as much as we kill this program, I feel the same way about Tennessee that Tolman you actually feel about South Carolina. I actually think if they had an easier schedule, I think they could be a little bit of a surprise team. But the schedule is just it's so brutal, and I don't think they're quite there yet as far as maybe having enough talent to be a contender. I mean, I think of them the same way as I do South Carolina. I think they're better than Missouri, but think the schedule could have them maybe finishing behind one or two of them. Addison, I'll let you go. Your thoughts on one of our favorite teams to make
Yeah.
fun of.
Well, they have been a dumpster fire for a while. I mean, it's been like a decade now, and they are one of the three worst programs in the SEC in that time frame.
Yeah.
So that's them, Kentucky, and Vanderbilt, and
Pathetic.
they're comparable in wins over that time period to those other programs, which you never would have expected.
Right.
But it seems like people always think that Tennessee is going to be back, and then they're not.
Yeah.
I do expect improvement. They bring back like pretty much the entire offense.
They're experienced, yeah.
Defensively, they've been pretty bad the last few years, so they've got a lot of work to do. Jerry Pruitt's a defensive guy, so hopefully, if you're a Tennessee fan, he can do something there. So I don't really think it matters. Like they've got 6 starters back on defense, but I don't know. They need to get a lot better. They gave up 36 points per game in conference last year.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
I like their strong safety's name, Nigel Warrior.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just want to point that
I
out.
do
It's
like Nigel Warrior.
Yeah, it's a great name. Dave, your thoughts on Tennessee? Are they pretty darn similar to South Carolina, or how do you feel about them?
Well, the difference is that I think South Carolina is just like one of those teams that's kind of stable. You know, maybe they'll have a up year where they'll be in like the 8 to 9 win range.
Right.
Tennessee has been very unstable. You know, they've been not consistently making bowls in the last 5 to 10 years. Things must be different under Pruitt, or they're hoping for things to be different under Pruitt.
Right.
I think the word for them this year is hope for improvement.
Okay.
I think they had a decent recruiting class. They've got some young guys that might push for playing time, so look for them maybe at the end of the year if those young guys, those great recruits that they had coming in this year, turn out to be pretty good. After they get some seasoning, maybe look for them to be an improved team by the end of the year.
Okay. Yeah, I think with a second-year coach, you definitely just want to see some improvement. I mean, in a tough conference like this, you don't expect them to really do a whole lot yet. But, yeah, if you see improvement, then that gives you a little bit of hope going forward.
Yeah. All right, well, we'll move on to the next team. Last year's surprise of the conference and maybe the nation, Kentucky Wildcats, 10-3 last year, nationally relevant through basically the end of the year. Now, they do lose Snell at running back. They lose a couple very good defensive players. I think they're likely bound for a little bit of a drop-off. But, Dave, I'll let you start with Kentucky. Your thoughts on them this year. Could they surprise again? Like, could they finish third in this division, or do you think there's going to be quite a bit of a drop-off?
No, I think there's going to be quite a bit of a drop-off. I think you have to replace – they had a workhorse in Benny Snell who's gone. They had a top 10 draft pick in Josh Allen who's gone. And those are kind of, you know, Kentucky doesn't typically get players like that. And they don't have them anymore, so I see them dropping off to the bottom half of the SEC East.
Okay. Addison, thoughts on Kentucky?
Couldn't really agree more with Tolman there. They relied a lot on Benny Snell last year. Even though they bring back their quarterback, they bring back their top receiver. But really, it was about the running game. It was about
their quarterback sucked.
Yeah, I mean, all right. Their average score last year in conference play was 18-17. So they were relying heavily on their defense, and just they lost a lot on defense, honestly. And this is not the kind of program that can just reload, you know, and replace those kind of guys. So you have to expect like a pretty big drop off. Last year, their season was like their best season in probably like 40 years or something.
I don't know
like
how
that.
they did what they did. Like, I just don't get it. So
it was. Yeah, they won a lot of games, like especially the Missouri game.
Yeah,
there were a lot of games where it was like, I don't know. You wondered how they kept doing it every week, but they just did. It was a great year for them. But
I remember that week specifically taking Missouri -7 because everyone was like, "Holy shit, Kentucky's getting points against Missouri." And I was like, "This line is -7 for a reason."
Yeah.
And somehow they still pulled it off. Like, it made no sense to me. But yeah, I mean, I don't really need to add anything. I think you guys are right. They lost like 3 of their best players. And, I wouldn't be shocked if they won like 7 games or maybe 8, but like that's really getting up there. I think it's more like a 6-win team this year. Like bowl game eligibility would be good for them.
Yeah. No, that's right. Like,
yeah.
They're going to be fighting for bowl eligibility, I think.
Yeah, and their quarterback does suck. So we'll go back to the next team.
I mean, they've got Toledo, Eastern Michigan, UT Martin, Louisville. So there's 4 games right there.
Should be 4 wins.
You expect
they got Arkansas. That could be a 5th.
So
win.
they could.
Vanderbilt could be a 6th win.
It's definitely possible for them to get back to a bowl, but
yeah,
there's a huge drop off, no question.
All right, the last team in the East is the Vanderbilt Commodores. I don't care. So, Addison, do you want to start? I mean, I don't know. Go ahead.
Well, they have beaten Tennessee 3 years in a row, so.
Who doesn't beat Tennessee?
We just like to point out when Tennessee sucks.
What do you think about Derek Mason? Do you think is he doing like a good job considering the job that he is at?
Considering the job, yeah, I think so.
Because he's been a pretty good coach.
Yeah, he's been to a few bowls.
Yeah.
So I mean, if you're doing that at Vandy, I consider that good.
No, I mean, like, his defense is always good. It wasn't as good last year, actually, but
yeah, for a few years they were like pretty solid on
defense.
Yeah.
You could bet the under in their game every time.
Yeah.
It was amazing. But
they do have a really good running back, actually, Keyshawn Vaughn.
Yeah,
transfer from Illinois a few years ago. He averaged 7.9 yards a carry last year, so he is he is one of the best players in this conference, so they have that going for him. But besides that, I don't really know what else to talk about as far as Vandy.
Dave, I mean, are they going to make a bowl game?
No. I think last year they had a pretty competent quarterback in Kyle Shermer, who they have to replace this year. And that first-year quarterback starter, I'm going to say no, not make a bowl game. Probably finish at the bottom of the SEC East.
All right, fair enough. Yeah. I agree. They're going to be in the basement. We'll move on to the SEC West now, and we'll start with probably the most dominant program in the last decade, Alabama Crimson Tide, obviously. They bring back actually more than what I think they usually bring back. They have 6 on both sides of the ball. They bring back Tua, Jerry Jeudy, who I think is the best receiver in the country. The defense might even be better than what it was last year. And they had some issues in the secondary. I think if they I guess I'm just going. I think if they clean that up, they'll be extremely hard to beat in any game that they are playing. Their schedule actually is not that bad, just like last year. They're going to be favored in every game. Dave, I'll start with you. Alabama, is there going to be like any surprises with them? Or are they going to be even better than they were last year? What do you think?
I don't see any surprises here. They're I think a strong favorite in the SEC West. I love their receiving unit. Like their receivers that they have right now might be like my favorite like overall receiving unit in college football in the last decade.
Yeah, Jerry Jeudy's really
I think they're loaded. I love Jerry Jeudy. He's one of my favorite players in college football. Going to talk more about him later. Their schedule sets them up for another possible undefeated season college football playoff berth. They're on my short list for college football playoff contender, and I think everything keeps rolling for Alabama this year.
Okay. Addison, Bama, same shit as the last 10 years?
Yeah, every year and we preview Bama, it's like, okay, they're going to be really good. We know that.
Yeah.
But, yeah, this year, especially offensively, is even crazier. The fact that they bring back Tua.
He's going to play in the fourth quarter this year, possibly.
Yeah. They bring back all these receivers. I mean, Jeudy, Bolitnikoff, I think, last year. Mm-hmm. And the other receivers that they've got are really good, too.
Yeah, Ruggs and Smith are very good.
So, yeah. And their
Are
offense.
Are they going to be better than last year?
Statistically, it's going to be hard to top. So I wouldn't say that they'll have just as much potential. Potential.
I mean, yeah.
Last year was a different Bama team. Like, it kind of caught people by surprise. You know how much they were airing it out. I think too.
Yeah. Well, Loxley's gone. He's in Maryland now,
Yeah.
so like I don't know how much that changes things.
True,
like Alabama
so-
always has
and
turnover in the coaching
They
staff.
always every year it seems like they got a new
OC,
offensive
new DC.
coordinator.
Now
yeah.
Sark is back. Sarkisian's the OC.
Yeah.
So I don't know like how different it's going to be, but I don't really think it's not like Sark's going to come in there and be like, well, we should change shit. Like I mean,
Yeah.
they were really good with what they did, so I'm
And
sure it'll be similar.
He'll enjoy throwing the ball anyway.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. We'll get.
One piece of evidence that you could make the case that they could be better than they were last year. Maybe not statistically, but I think every year they have lost or failed on some level in the college football playoff. They've come back and won the following year.
That's a key
Does
point.
that happen?
I think this team
is
is going to be very hungry.
Yes.
Yeah.
With
This
the guys
is a scary football team.
the guys they have back, and the fact that the way they ended last year
They're gonna be fucking pissed.
makes me want to put them. We'll talk about this more later, but makes me want to put them ahead of Clemson on the national stage.
I have them ahead of Clemson. I don't care. Spoiler.
Yeah,
I think they're the
because-
best team in the country.
Yeah, having that hunger definitely matters.
Yeah.
After a team wins the national championship, you always wonder, if they're gonna, be
It's
as
tough,
motivated.
complacent.
Yeah, no, definitely.
All right. Well, yeah, we'll get back to Bama probably in a little bit, but let's move on to the next team, a team that I find very interesting this year, and this is Dave. This is your team, LSU. I'm gonna let you go for it. Your feelings on them this year? Are they? I mean, obviously, I'm not gonna ask you if they're a contender. I think if they can beat Bama and Tuscaloosa, then obviously they're a contender. But do you feel that they're gonna be quite a bit better than they were last year? Because I think at times last year they actually felt a little overrated to me. I wasn't a big fan of them, especially on like the betting scene. But I think they're going to be pretty strong this year. What do you think about your Tigers?
So I'm going to talk about what the locals think first. Okay.
Yeah.
And I think for
I just
I
spit
think for
whiskey
the
everywhere. That's funny.
What'd
Go
you
ahead.
say?
I spit whiskey everywhere because it sounded funny the way you said it. Go ahead.
I'm going to talk about what the locals.
Yeah, right.
I don't know. I guess I've been living down there for a long time now and still can't do a Cajun accent, so I'm going to not do that for
Good.
this segment.
Yeah, go ahead.
I want to be able to understand you.
I'm also not going to attempt to talk like Coach O.
Yeah,
as much
please
as I
don't.
would want to.
Right.
Okay, so I think this is the first time since I want to say since I've lived down there, which has been 6 years, that my LSU friends are confident that the offense will be competent, and we think that the offense is going to actually take a step forward this year. People seem to like Joe Burrow at quarterback. I think that he had a really interesting year last year. He took some shots downfield and was successful at times, and I think that's what kept them in ball games. Confidence in the offense, but what everything really comes down to, and I think this year in particular, is going to be can they beat Alabama and Tuscaloosa, and that matchup probably is going to decide the SEC West. So they play Texas out of conference, which is an interesting game. I actually like LSU in that game. They've got Bama, could be a tough one, and maybe a typical LSU letdown against like a Texas A&M or a Mississippi State on the road. Something like that could give them trouble. Maybe put them at about 10-2 on the year. So I agree with the locals. I think that the offense will take a step forward. I think that definitely puts them as a contender. The Bama game will be one of the most interesting games and one of the most important games of college football this year. And one of my favorite players in college football this year that's not getting enough attention, keep an eye out for Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Interesting running back that I think could lead the SEC in rushing by the end of the year.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, that's a good overall take. I agree. I think the offense is going to take actually a little bit of a step forward. And it's been a while since they've actually been pretty competent on offense. Now, like you alluded to, some of these scores against Bama recently, like they look close, but Bama's really owned them, like suffocated them to where like it really hasn't been a game. But they're going to be really good on both sides of the ball. And I think the big question is now we got Coach O with expectations. And I don't know how that's going to go. I honestly think, though, that this team is a legitimate contender in this division. I'm going to say this, too. I think this team is a playoff contender maybe regardless. Just because I don't know. We'll get into that later in a different pod, I think. But I think this team is a legitimate playoff contender this year. Addison, your thoughts on LSU? Do you feel
So
the same
wait,
way?
you think that they could lose to Bama and still be?
I'll put it this way. I don't know what I'm gonna predict yet, but if I think this team could go 11-1 and get in and have two teams from the same division, which I know would piss everybody off, but I really think that could happen. But I'm not sure yet. I don't know if that's what I'm picking. I think their schedule is pretty brutal. 10-2 seems about right. But if they do go 11-1 with that schedule and they only lose to Bama, I think it's very possible, depending on how everything else obviously shakes out. But we'll get into that.
It'll be an interesting conversation on the college football playoff.
Yeah, when we do that preview, the preseason kind of national preview playoff pod, I think their name might come up. So Addison, LSU.
Well, I agree. I think that it sounds like we all think that LSU Bama is going to be the de facto division championship game. I agree with that. This is a team that it's always one of the most talented teams in the country. It's also a team that usually has a lot of attrition, usually a lot of guys leaving early to go pro. Just like Bama does, kind of. But this year they have a lot coming back, which is what I really like about this team.
But they lost Greedy and Devin White.
They did lose.
Big losses.
They lost the two biggest names on defense, but they bring back pretty much everyone else.
True. They got a hopefully a healthy Clavion Chase on.
Yeah.
The guy's a stud.
Yeah, he's big.
He went out first game of the season last year, didn't he?
I think so.
Yeah.
It was first or second game of the season.
Yeah, but I like the defense. I like their depth. Joe Burrow, before, as Ohio State fans, we know a little bit about him. Talented guy. I think LSU fans had kind of just expected kind of mediocre quarterback play the last few years, and then Joe Burrow came in, had a shaky start to the year, kind of he wasn't completing a lot of passes.
Yeah.
They took a lot of downfield shots.
They did, yeah.
He didn't have a lot of turnovers, which was a positive. And then as the season went on, he played better. And now I think going into this next year, there's a lot of expectations for him to be like the guy, that takes him to the next level. So,
I'm gonna. My thought on LSU has always been that if you can have Matt Flynn, then you are a legitimate championship contender, because LSU always has good everything else except quarterback, and all you just need is Matt Flynn to be a contender, and I think you can compare Joe Burrow to Matt Flynn.
Yeah, I think he's deceptive with his legs. He can make some plays with his legs, and I think that the first half of the year I didn't think he was that good, but I think he really got a lot more comfortable as the year went on, and he was. You're right. I think in a few of the games, his aggressiveness and his ability to just take some shots is definitely what helped that offense out a little bit. Honestly, let's say you flipped him and Dwayne Haskins, and let's say Burrow won the job and Haskins transferred. Burrow was not going to put up the stats that Dwayne did, but I think he would have did very well in Ryan Day's system. I think people would have thought a little differently about him. So I think he's talented, and I think he is going to be a big reason why they take a little bit of a step forward for sure. So we obviously feel quite strongly about LSU. Tolman, I got another little one for you. When they go to Texas, I think they're going to blow them out, actually. But we might.
I like LSU a lot.
Yeah. I already bet LSU. So we're going to move on to the next team. A pretty interesting team, actually. A little bit of a younger team, Texas A&M. Jimbo Fisher. This is his second year there. They are recruiting at a very high level with him being there now, and
spending a lot.
They are spending quite a bit. That's what they do. Got a lot of oil money. That got oil, but yeah, they got a very tough schedule. They are at Clemson week 2. They draw Bama at home. They're at Georgia, at LSU. The last 2 games of the year. This is yeah,
What was that?
That is brutal.
yeah. That is just as hard as South Carolina's schedule.
It sounded like there was an eagle
It sounded like a
on your
firework.
end.
Yeah.
I was whistling.
That was
I
awesome,
whistling
yeah.
because it was. I don't know how I made that.
Yeah, that was
Like,
amazing. Yeah.
I was looking at their schedule too, and I was like,
Yeah.
Yep.
I think offensively they're gonna be they're gonna put up some points. I think they're gonna move the ball. I have questions about their defense. I think their defense is going to struggle quite a bit. This is a team that even Phil Steele has pointed out, and I actually agree with this, that I think next year this could be a legitimate national contender with the kids that are likely going to be back. But they do bring back Kellen Mond. I think they're going to be very talented, but the schedule is definitely tough. Addison, we'll start with you this time. A&M, are they maybe a surprise contender, or are they a year away for sure?
Year away before they make noise, at least, I think. They lose a lot on defense. There's a lot of production gone. Offensively, I think they'll be good. Kellen Mond's back, a lot of the skill guys. Travion Williams is gone, though. That's a big loss offensively. I think the O-line will be solid, but there's a good chance they give up a lot of points, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they were pretty good last year. I think they honestly might take a little bit of a step back, but yeah, going forward, I think they're in pretty good shape.
Yeah, Corey from Denver, which we'll get a couple of the other pod members that weren't able to be on tonight. We'll get their picks later for the division and the actual conference. But Corey from Denver pointed out that he thinks this is going to be the best 4-loss team in the country. I don't think he's far off with that. This is a very talented team. I would not be shocked week 2 if they made Clemson fans a little bit nervous in the fourth quarter, but
last year they did.
Yeah, the issue, though, is that their defense, Clemson might score 42 on it.
That's true.
So that's going to be an interesting game from a betting perspective. But Tolman, A&M, your thoughts on them? Are they a surprise contender, or are they definitely a year or 2 away?
so I think they're a surprise contender. Just because I'm looking at those 4 games. Okay, you've got Clemson, Alabama, LSU, Georgia. Those are kind of what we're thinking are the 4 losses, right?
Right.
I see them winning one of those games.
It's possible. Yeah.
I see them surprising, winning one of those games, and they finish like 9-3 or something like that. So, if you want to call that being a contender in the division, maybe,
Right.
and maybe if they like win the game against, if you have some weird thing where like they beat LSU beats Alabama, something like that, then you got a weird like 3,
Sure. Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
But
What a brutal.
Their schedule is so tough.
Yeah.
I like their team. I like them actually winning one of those games. I'm not sure which one yet, but
the game that would make the most sense would be Bama, I guess. I mean, it's at home off a bye.
Or Clemson.
They could shot
early
Clemson.
in a shootout
Yeah.
because think about this. Clemson, they lost their entire defensive line, so could you get in a shootout with Kellen Mond and A&M and things go A&M's way early on?
Sure.
Something like that could happen.
I'll tell you a game that I think they're November 30th, their last game, they are losing because I think they got to play Georgia and South Carolina the 2 weeks before. They got to play at Death Valley. So I have that as a definite loss.
That's a crazy last 2 weeks of the season.
It's ridiculous.
At Georgia, at LSU.
What happened? Yeah. Who did they piss off? I mean, that's crazy. Tolman, I'm kind of with you. I actually think this is a surprise contender. Now,
it's definitely possible since they've got those 2 teams to finish the season that they could get to that point in position, but then that's such a tough 2 games. Yeah.
There's been a few times in history where teams have been like a year early. Ohio State in 2014 was a year early. There's definitely been some teams.
Ohio State in 2002 was a year early.
Right. There's definitely been some teams. And that pisses me off because they should have won 03 and they should have won 15. But there's definitely been some teams in history that have been a year early with like mega talent, and people are like, "Holy shit, we thought they were a year away." Now, I don't know if all those teams have the same schedule that A&M has this year, and I'm going to say they are a surprise contender, but we're kind of saying like it's an unlikely thing. Their defense is going to be I think, pretty leaky. I think Bama and Clemson could put up a lot of points on these guys. But yeah, we'll move on to the next team. A pretty polarizing team.
It's interesting.
Within this podcast.
I wish Corey was here to talk about it.
Yeah, so we have the Auburn Tigers here, who also have an incredibly hard schedule. Totally sighing.
No, I gotta spend some. We gotta spend some time on this. But go ahead.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, I bet we will.
Who wants to start? Should I go? I guess I'll go first.
You start.
All right. So Auburn is an interesting team this year. Their line play is going to be quite strong on both sides of the ball. In my opinion, I think their D line is very elite nationally. The issue I have with Auburn this year is that I believe they're starting a redshirt freshman, which, whatever, there's been a lot of really good redshirt freshmen in the history of college football.
Or a true freshman.
Or a true freshman.
Yeah.
Right.
It's going to be a freshman.
The issue I have is that I think Auburn's going to have a lot of trouble passing the football. Now, Gus is taking over play calling again. I think they're actually going to get back to running the ball, which is when they're at their best. Auburn has been at their best under Gus when I think there hasn't been as much to be expected of them. So I'm having a hard time pegging this team. I really think you could say that this is maybe a surprise contender. I also wouldn't be shocked if this team lost 6 games. I'm being dead serious about that. I really think they could. Addison, I'll start with you. Auburn, which way are you leaning as far as like where this team stands this year? Are they a surprise contender, or do you think they're more like 4 or 5 in this division?
I think they're about, so we're talking about them 4th. I think that's about where they are.
Mm-hmm.
They could easily have 5 losses. There's a good chance they do end up with 5 losses. They could have even more than that.
Yeah.
I think they're a good team.
Yeah.
The schedule is really hard. They've got some tough away games. They play Oregon week 1, which is one of the most important games of the season, really, because
just like last year,
that game determines kind of the Pac-12's perception for the rest of the year. So Oregon's got to look good in that game. They need to win that.
They need to win. They
need to win that game for the Pac-12. If they lose, then I don't see much hope for the Pac-12 at the end of the year if we're talking about the playoffs. So as far as Auburn's actual team, you talked about the quarterback. It's going to be someone who has 0 experience. The entire line is back. This is something I talked about with Corey a lot. They did underperform last year. I don't think anyone from Auburn would try to say otherwise.
Yeah.
So they do need to improve. I mean, it's good to have everyone back. Sometimes it takes O-line some time to gel, get some continuity. The running game was not what Auburn has been accustomed to having.
It was shit.
They did not have a 1,000-yard rusher. That's rare under Gus. Yeah. I think that's the first time this probably happened.
Probably, yeah.
They didn't have a guy like a Trey Mason, Kerryon Johnson, like that kind of guy. They've had a lot of good running backs under him.
Yeah.
And I think they need to get the running game back on track, or else this offense is really going to struggle. Because, like you said, I don't see much in the passing game with a freshman quarterback. Not really a whole lot in the receiving game. They did lose their top 2 receivers.
Yeah, they're going to have some pretty green receivers. They're going to be rookies. Yeah.
It's a defense that the last few years you expect to be one of the nation's best, and I think that's going to continue. Should have really good D-line play.
Very good D-line.
This is a team that could be involved in some really ugly games, I think.
Yeah.
You're thinking like Mississippi State last year or like Michigan State.
I think there could be a lot
offense struggles, defense, plays really well.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of unders, that kind of team.
Yes. Dave, go ahead, man. Where are you leaning on Auburn this year? Are they possible, I would say, very surprise contender, or do you think they are pretty much maybe around 3 to 5 in that division?
Okay, I'm going to throw this out there as very surprise contender. And it's a weird theory, but I'm going to go for it. So,
go for it.
The last couple of years, pretty disappointment. So you have complete failure in the Sugar Bowl, going back two bowl seasons, right? And that led to a pretty disappointing year last year, right? So anytime you go through something like that in the SEC, the coach is gonna be on the hot seat. And I would say that Gus Malzahn is probably he's got the hottest seat in the SEC. Do y'all agree with that?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I think him and Muschamp are up there, to be honest.
Every time that Gus Malzahn has been on the hot seat, he's put together either a decent year or he's come back and he's like beat Alabama the next year. So Gus knows he's on the hot seat. He's calling the plays this year because he's trying to save his own ass.
Yeah.
And I think he's gonna. The only reason I say that they're a surprise contender is because I think that he is in I'm gonna save my own ass mode, and I am going to pick a quarterback and hope that I can develop him and we can be a lot better by the end of the year and maybe, like win a surprise game against like an Alabama or something like that because I'm Gus Malzahn, I'm on the hot seat and I need to save my ass. So that's why I have a gut feeling that they are going to be like a surprise contender just because of the hunger and the need for job preservation.
Okay.
Tolman, the point about Gus calling plays is actually pretty important too. When they went to the national championship, he was the play caller. I thought he was a really fucking good play caller.
He's a good play caller.
Yeah, he always kept defenses off balance. Last few years, they definitely haven't been as creative. They didn't have a running quarterback either, so that kind of contributed to that a little bit. But I think they're a lot better when Gus is calling plays. I think they still have question marks offensively, but that is a positive for them, him calling plays. And it seems like that you kind of alluded to, it's a program that whatever you're expecting them to do, they do the opposite. If there's expectations, they kind of fall short. If no one's talking about them, they tend to do better. Yeah. So, I expect them to lose like 4 games, honestly, but
they could lose 4 games. They could lose a game to like Mississippi State, but then like surprise Alabama or something.
Yeah, they could beat Georgia, but they could lose to like Mississippi State.
Yeah, they're like the wild card this year.
Yeah. I think their first 6 games are pretty important. Like I think I could see a bunch of young kids. Let's say they lose to Oregon, lose at A&M, and then they lose to either Mississippi State or at Florida. They get a bye week, and then, if these guys already got like 3 losses, I could see this thing spiraling out of control, and I could see Gus getting fired. But on the flip side, I think Dave's right. I mean, I think they could shock the world and win like 9-10 games with the talent they have if the quarterback pans out, Gus calls the plays right. I'm having a really hard time pegging this team because of that. I'm siding more with Addison in the sense that I think they're going to be made super one-dimensional by the elite teams that they have to play, and that's going to rack up 4 to 5 losses, I think.
Yeah, it's going to like the fact that if they can't throw the ball, it's going to make it that much easier to stop their run game.
Right, and that's the issue I have. If I felt like I had any confidence that they could throw the ball, then that would be one thing, and that's where Dave's point comes in. That let's say Nix or Gatewood comes in and they're actually somewhat competent throwing the ball. Then we're talking a whole different story here. You got Gus's running offenses going. You have a nasty fucking front 7. It could be a surprise team, but they could also suck. So
they don't want to be playing from behind. I definitely think that.
Yeah.
So I think I already have like 4 contenders in the SEC West, which may seem like too much, but I just envision a scenario where just because there's some talented teams, there's some hunger. You could see this could be one of those years where SEC West teams beat up on each other, and you end up with like a few teams, like 2 or 3 teams with 2 losses at the end of the season. I could see that happening. And that would make it for one of the more interesting SEC West battles we've seen in a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So all right, well we'll go ahead and move on to the next program, the Mississippi State Bulldogs. A team last year that Addison already alluded to, they were very nasty on defense, struggled a little bit on offense just due to the unbalanced approach. The fact that who's that dog shit quarterback they had?
Nick Fitzgerald.
Nick Fitzgerald could not throw a football. He could run it, and they could run it pretty well, but when they had to throw it, that was it. And if they had any kind of confidence through the air last year. I think that was a team that actually could have shocked the world and won that division with how good their defense was. But I think their defense is going to be good again. They're going to probably take a little bit of step back. Before I get into it, though, I feel like I'm going to let you guys go first. Dave, your thoughts on Mississippi State? Could they actually? I don't want to say like surprise contender. I think we're getting into the teams that we probably don't feel that way about. But do you think this team could actually surprise and finish a little bit higher up in this division than what they're picked?
I think now we're starting to drop off in the SEC West. So I already said I think I put a limit on myself. If this were last year's Mississippi State team, yes, I would say they were a contender. But look, they lost way too much on defense. They lost like multiple early round NFL draft picks: Montez Sweat, Chauncey Rivers.
Right.
That is good, and a lot of those guys were like experienced, 3-4 year, like 3-year starters at Mississippi State, and that's kind of like a once in a generation Mississippi State defense that you're going to have to replace. So you have that, plus you have an unsure situation at quarterback. You've got, Tommy Stevens, Penn State, who's transferring in, paired with Joe Moorhead. So you've got potential for some chemistry there. You've got Keaton Thompson, who's shown some flashes, has made some big plays, has like performed well in a starting role here and there. But I just don't think that they have enough on offense, and I think that they lost so much on defense that you just can't consider them in the top tier in the SEC West.
Okay, yeah, Addison.
I see them as like the mirror image in the West of Kentucky. Like there's a lot in common there. Last year was a team elite defensively, for sure. They relied heavily on their defense to because the offense wasn't great. Offense just needed to score like 20 points, and the defense would do the rest. That's how they won games. And then the fact that they lose a bunch of guys on defense, and they're not a program that can just replace guys like that, with the defense having been such a importance last year, definitely going to be a lot of drop off. Like their offense can't carry the load. So, if there's drop off, they're going to struggle a little bit.
Yeah, I think I actually think this team could finish a little higher up than what most people think. I agree with you guys. I think the defense is going to take a little bit of a step back. I still think they're going to be decent. They're not going to be like Texas A&M bad or anything like that. I don't think they're going to create the havoc that they did last year, though. But I think the offense might. It really depends on Stevens, and I think that Moorhead. We talked about this. I think that was a big loss for Penn State, and we don't know enough about him as like the CEO, like the head coach yet. But I think the guy's a great play caller, great like passing game coordinator. I think there's going to be a lot more balance in offense this year. Now, do they have the playmakers around Stevens? That's the thing. I don't know if they have enough of that. I wouldn't be shocked if this team gave a couple of the big boys, if they made them nervous, I wouldn't be shocked by that. But,
the linebackers are still good.
Yeah.
But they did lose a lot defensively.
So I think this team, I would not be surprised if they finished maybe like 4th. I think most publications have them like 5th, maybe 6th, but I think they're about right where they should be, and we'll see what Moorhead does with them. But
they're above these next two teams, I'd definitely say. Like you expect Mississippi State to be a little bit competitive, but then I think after this we're dropping off a lot.
Yeah, I agree. There's a big drop off in my opinion now to the Ole Miss Rebels, who I don't know. They're not very good. I mean, here's the thing. I don't know a lot about Matt Luke. It seems like everything I read, it seems like his players love playing for him. I think they.
He seems like a good guy, which they haven't had for a while.
Right. I think that. I don't know. This team's just not good. I don't really know what to say, to be honest. Addison, what do you think about Ole Miss?
One of our favorite coaches is popping up on this staff this year, Rich Rod. He's the new OC. Last year, they had a lot of talent in the receiving corps. It's all gone. And their defense was really bad. They bring back all those guys, but I mean,
they were really bad.
They were really bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't expect much improvement there, and the offense lost everyone. They are bowl eligible this year, but I don't expect them to make a bowl. So actually, what's funny is talking about bowl eligibility. We forgot to mention that Missouri is currently bowl banned.
Yeah, they're bowl banned.
But they're appealing it, so that's up in the air.
Yeah.
But yeah, this team is a non-factor.
The problem I have with Ole Miss is they care more about the party before the game than the actual game. So I just always have an issue with this team because of that. Dave, your thoughts on Ole Miss? Is there any hope for them this year, or are they just going to be?
I also have the same issue.
Yeah.
And living down there is really, really annoying.
Yeah.
Incredibly annoying. The only thing that's interesting about Ole Miss this year is potentially Rich Rod with a highly rated quarterback recruit, Matt Corral, who has landed there.
Right.
But no, they'll finish above Arkansas. They'll beat Arkansas.
Okay.
That's all I can say.
And so speaking of Arkansas, we're going to move on to them. 2-10 last year with first hard pass. Chad Morris, second year there. Now, the one thing I will say about Arkansas is, from a betting perspective, you might be able to get some overs in with them. I actually think Chad Morris knows what he's doing on offense. Their defense. Now, we talked about some bad defenses with like A&M. Who else did we talk about that was trash on defense? It doesn't matter. Arkansas is going to be really bad on defense.
Yeah.
But there might be a little bit of hope for them on offense. But I don't really see this team winning more than like 4 games. So there's not really a whole lot to talk about. They're definitely not going to do anything in the SEC. Dave, I don't know, anything on Arkansas? Okay. Addison?
I think they're solidly in the basement. Yeah, their defense was atrocious last year. There is zero depth on this team. I mean, not really much to talk about.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. Well, we're pushing like an hour anyway, so it's a good transition into our picks for this conference. So let's start with the guys that couldn't be on tonight. Corey from Denver, Steele. They both have Alabama winning the West, and then they both have Georgia winning the East. Shocker.
I've got their comments right here.
Yeah, you can give those out. Corey had some interesting ones. Corey, I felt like was like reading my mind somehow on certain things. But go ahead with their comments.
Corey said, "Bama versus Georgia championship game. Bama champ. LSU could backdoor the playoff at 11-1. Muschamp is on the hot seat. A&M will be the best 4-loss team in the country, and if Tennessee can steady its O-line, they will be frisky."
Yeah, I think those are reasonable thoughts.
Yeah.
Steele's thoughts?
Steele said Kentucky back to sucking. He says SEC is king. That's pretty much it.
That's all he said.
He didn't even give his picks.
I'm assuming he has Bama beating Georgia.
Yeah.
Because if he didn't, I feel like he would want us to throw out his like wild prediction.
Well, he did say, yeah. Repeat what Corey said.
Okay.
I guess that's what
yeah. So, Dave, I'll start with you. Do you have anything different than what the rest of the world has for these divisions in the conference champ?
I really want to.
Yeah.
I so bad want my scenario where you got SEC West team kind of beating up on each other. You end up with a strange like 3-way 2-team loss where like LSU comes out of it and it's like LSU Georgia and Georgia wins or something like that, but it's gonna be Bama over Georgia.
Okay.
Again.
Yeah. Addison?
I really want the chaos scenario though. So.
Yeah. Anything different?
I agree with Tolman. That would be fun to see. Yeah. Going into the year, this looks like a year where there's definitely a lot of highly rated teams, kind of like 2014, where they had, I think, in the early their playoff projections, they had like 4 SEC teams in the playoff.
Yeah.
Something crazy like that. But yeah, I'm not gonna try and make any crazy hot take where I say that it's not gonna be Bama versus Georgia.
Right.
I think there's 2 teams in each division that have a shot at getting to the championship. You got Bama, LSU, Georgia, Florida.
Mm-hmm.
Although I think the gap is much bigger.
Little 14 playoff for the
yeah,
pretty much.
Yeah. No, it could work out that way. I think Georgia's a lot better than Florida. The gap in the West is closer, in my opinion.
I agree. Yeah.
What's interesting is some of the scenarios that could be fun in this conference aren't actually like who gets to the championship, but like the weird like one-loss team scenarios at the end of the year if we're talking about the playoff. Because there are 3 teams that I think, like it's possible that there are 3 one-loss teams.
Oh yeah. No, I mean, what if like?
So what happens in those kind of scenarios?
Right.
I got a whole crazy scenario written down about how some one-loss SEC teams that don't play in a championship game could get to the college football playoff. I'm going to save that for that pot.
Yeah.
It's possible that LSU could do that. I definitely think so.
Yeah, nothing.
So yeah, and then I have Bama winning.
Yeah, nothing special. I actually am. I think there's actually a pretty big gap in the East. Like I said, I'm not as high in Florida as I think the rest of. I think either of you guys or the rest of the world is. I think Georgia's definitely winning the East. I think that the West is a little closer, but I think Alabama. We talked about them getting embarrassed. I mean, they haven't been embarrassed like that since really. When OSU played them, that game should have been a little bit wider of a margin of victory than it was. But Alabama hasn't been beaten like that in a while, and I think they're going to be super pissed off. LSU, I mean, I think in a one-game scenario in Tuscaloosa, they could pull it off. I think LSU, I already mentioned it. I think LSU is a possible playoff team no matter what. But I do have Alabama beating Georgia. I think even though we're saving stuff for the playoff pot, I mean, if Alabama's winning the SEC, I think in all likelihood they're in the playoff. But there's definitely this is always a strong conference, and I think this year especially they've got some strong teams in there. But any closing thoughts for you guys at all on? I don't know.
I got a question for you. If Florida does pull the upset over Georgia, do you think they get in, or do you see them dropping other games along the way that keeps them out?
Yeah, I think if they're good enough to beat Georgia, and I don't know, obviously, I don't know.
Because I mean, that series, it's kind of series that
it's usually the de facto
any team
game.
can win anyway.
Right, yeah,
so
it's usually the semifinal game right now.
Yeah.
Yes, of course. I think Florida, if they beat Georgia, they probably will win the East. I would say,
Yeah.
But I don't think that's gonna happen. So
I don't either.
Yeah, Dave, any final thoughts on the SEC at all?
Do we want to talk about SEC Heisman candidates, or?
Yeah, we can do that real quick.
No,
we can do that to close it out real quick. I mean, obviously in the West, I think Tua is obviously top 2 candidate. I think. How about this, Dave? Why don't you start with who the obvious guys are, but maybe give a couple surprise guys that you think could be up there.
The obvious guys are Tua and Fromm.
Yeah, agree.
Maybe I think there's a lot of odds makers that like Swift.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna take a pass on that. My favorite player in college football is Jerry Jeudy right now. I love him.
Yeah.
He would be my dark horse Heisman candidate.
Yeah, I think Jerry Jeudy is the best receiver I've seen in a very long time. I think he is going to be an NFL All-Pro receiver.
And you can't double him all the time because you've got Ruggs and you've got Devontae Smith who can burn you too. So he's got that scenario where he's the top receiver out of that trio.
Yeah.
Paired with Tua and potential downfield passing game with Sark.
Right.
I'll sign me up for that. I'll take that as a value Heisman bet.
Yeah, I'll give you. I got a surprise one, I guess that could happen. I talked about this team possibly being shocking the world and being a year early. I could see Mon for A&M being a surprise contender. If they're that good, I think it's good because he takes the next step to being an elite quarterback. And it's usually a quarterback driven award. So that's I love Jerry Jeudy like you do, Tolman. I feel like the year that Larry Fitzgerald was a finalist, I thought he was the best player in football and he should have won it. Receivers always kind of get the shaft with this award,
right?
But
that's probably what's going to happen. But,
yeah,
and this is not the year for this is the year where there are clearly all the favorites are quarterbacks,
right?
Very clearly,
right.
So it's not the year for that. But I still love.
Yeah.
Jeudy.
Look, if he has if they go undefeated and he has 2,200 yards or something, which I don't think that's that absurd with him being single covered most every game. Yeah, there's a chance, but I think Mond is my guy. That would be my surprise guy.
I like that dark horse pick actually of Mond.
Yeah.
Like, there's not a lot of guys that I would
good.
pick, just because you got two in front. You got two of the best quarterbacks in the country, so naturally they're going to be the favorites. But the thing about Mond is that there's a good chance that he could get a lot of rushing yards too. So like, there's a good chance that they ask him to do a lot.
Right.
So if they have a good season, that he could be racking up a lot of stats.
Yeah. Is nobody on the Kelly Bryant for Heisman train? Hard pass. All right, so yeah, that's gonna wrap up the SEC pod. I think once this is loaded up, then the next pod you guys will see will be the ACC plus Notre Dame pod. It was supposed to be that pod first, and then the schedule got rearranged. But we said if you were gonna skip a pod, which you never should, with us, you would skip the ACC pod because it's going to be probably pretty boring. But we'll figure out a way to spice it up. We'll get you guys some entertainment.
We'll have some insiders.
Yeah.
Us, so
we'll need to find an ACC expert, one of our friends that cares about that conference.
Yeah, we will, because we're not. I know me and Nick aren't going to have much to say.
Well, we
just don't have that region. We just don't have that region.
Well, we got 40% of the pod is going to be interested because Corey is an ACC guy and he likes
sarcasm,
BT.
Dude.
No, I know, yeah, right. But it is going to be interesting that we don't care and then two of them actually care because one is just a Notre Dame fan and he's going to talk for 22 minutes about Notre Dame. And then at the end, we're all going to be like, okay, so let's move on to the next team. But, yeah, so you guys will see us next for, I believe, the ACC and Notre Dame pod. And then we'll wrap it up in a couple weeks with the Big Ten pod. And then we will have a final preseason pod where we do kind of like a national preview, like our playoff picks. It'll probably be a little shorter. Give our Heisman picks for the year, Heisman surprise contenders or whatever, like our one dark horse. And then we're into the regular season, thank God. And we'll get back into our weekly schedule like we did last year. So until next time.
KFR.